If teaching stimulus-based multiple choice questions in your AP History class has not been going well and all you hear in your classroom is the great weeping and gnashing of teeth when you give these kinds of questions to your students, then this video is for you. I'm going to show you exactly how I would teach students to perform well on these questions. So if that's the kind of thing you're into, let's get it. Now, in order for us to teach our students how to tackle these questions, we have to be clear on the 3 tasks these questions require. Number 1, a student needs content knowledge to get the right answer. Number 2, they need to be able to employ their historical thinking skills like causation or change over time. You know, for a long time I thought those are the only 2 things my students needed to perform well on these kinds of questions. But then I started noticing that even some of my best students, those students who knew the content and were masters of the skills, they still consistently did poorly on a whole exam made up of stimulus-based questions. And that's when I realized that stimulus-based questions actually required a 3rd skill and a 4th skill. The 3rd skill was conditioning and the 4th was dissection, and let's look at each of them in turn. Now here's what I mean by conditioning. Those students who knew the content and could perform the skills would almost always get 1 question right. Like if I gave them just 1 practice question or 2 practice questions and said, take your time, it's fine, they would almost always get the right answer. But put 30 of those questions together, or 50 or 55, and then put a ticking clock in front of them, and then all of a sudden they didn't do nearly as well. That's because they were not practiced in answering these questions quickly, which is a 3rd kind of skill that almost no one talks about that takes practice, which is to say conditioning. Now, when I was a young man and slightly crazier, I decided that ultra marathons would be my thing. If you don't know what an ultra marathon, it's a marathon, but ultra. So I signed up for my first 50K in Chattanooga, Tennessee and started training with some friends. Now my friends were both veteran ultra marathoners, and so I just took all their advice. They taught me about cadences and they gave me tips for eating and recovery, etc., etc. By the time we hit 19 miles in our training runs, one of my friends said that with the remaining 6 weeks of our training, I'd probably do better to work out my legs with weights instead of continuing to run longer and longer distances. So I stopped trying to surpass 19 miles and I started doing all the squats. So by the time race day arrived, I had never run more than 19 miles, and this trail that stretched before me was 31 miles. That's no big deal, I've been doing squats like a boss. But wouldn't you know it, by the time I got to 19 miles in the race, I was completely exhausted and had to drop out. And why is that? Well, my theory is not that I didn't have enough strength in my body to complete it, it's that I hadn't trained my mind enough. Like, it takes some serious mental fortitude to push through your body screaming at you to stop. Because I'd never actually trained my mind to go 31 miles, I didn't have it in me on race day. And I think that's what happens to those students who know their content and their skills but can't seem to hack it when the pressure is on. They haven't had the opportunity to put in the paces to feel comfortable on race day. So my suggestion for remedying this problem is to practice rapid document review. Now look, almost nobody is wasting time on the questions. If they're losing time, it's on trying to read and interpret the document. And the truth is, some students can comprehend faster than others, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't practice interpreting documents quickly. So what I do is I put a document on the screen or a piece of paper and I hand it out, and then I put 30 seconds on a timer. And when the timer starts, they have to read the document, and then when the timer finishes, they have to flip that document over or I take it off the screen. And then they have to write a quick summary, not more than a sentence, on the back of that document. And then we do it again, and then we do it again, and then we do it again. And actually, this is a great bell ring. The more you do it, the more practice they'll have in actually comprehending those documents quickly. And it's up to you to figure out how you want to check them for comprehension, but the point is, I found this to be a great exercise for speeding up work on stimulus-based multiple choice questions. Now, the next skill they need to build is the ability to understand how the multiple choice questions are built, which is to say they need to dissect them. They need to know that nearly every question the College Board sends them will conform to the following scheme: a prompt, 4 answers, 2 of which are wrong, 1 of which is a distractor, and 1 of which is correct. Now, if your students are like mine, as soon as they read a question, they start hunting for the right answer, but the first thing I want them to do is hunt for the 2 obviously wrong answers and then identify the distractor. So, I give them the questions, and I usually do this in groups, and here, in order to get credit for the question, you actually have to identify the 3 wrong answers. In other words, for this exercise, the right answer is the wrong answer. And once they've identified the 2 obviously wrong answers, they need to explain why those are wrong, and usually wrong answers are wrong for one of 3 reasons. Number 1, it's factually wrong. Number 2, it's outside the time period of the prompt. And number 3, it uses the wrong historical thinking skill. However, the distractor is usually factually correct as a statement, but doesn't correctly answer the question. So I want them to identify all of these. For example, let's just take one from the APUSH CED. The line in question is, what serves as evidence for the Republicans' claim that their fathers had abolished slavery in their national territory? Now, APUSH teachers are going to know immediately that the correct answer is the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. But we don't care about the right answer here. I want them to figure out the 2 obviously wrong answers and then the distractor. Now, if the students know their stuff, then they will identify B and D as the obviously wrong answers because they are factually wrong in response to this prompt. Jefferson and Washington had a kind of tortured relationship to slavery, but that had nothing to do with abolishing slavery in the territories. And the 3/5 Compromise basically sanctioned slavery in the southern states. So those are the 2 obviously wrong answers, and then the distractor is going to be A. Now look how sneaky this is. Was the international slave trade banned in 1808? Yes. Yes, that is factually true, but did that ban slavery in the U.S. territories? No way. That is very much a distractor. And I want to do this with them over and over and over again, and every time they need to give me the reasons that they're choosing what they're choosing, and that leads to some very enlightening conversation. And slowly, over time, both the conditioning and the dissection have led my students to getting quicker and more efficient in answering these kinds of questions. All right, click here for more teacher tips for the AP classroom. And click here if you want to check out my teacher resource packs for AP World and APUSH. And hey, let us all know in the comments if you have other strategies for teaching stimulus-based multiple choice questions so that we can all learn from each other. I'll catch you on the flip-flop. Heimler out.